Okay, we're going to start off by assuming a client wants us to write a short little program. So we're going to call the client's desires program specifications. Suppose the client wants you to write a program that inputs 3 numbers. The client wants to know the sum, the average, and the product of those 3 values. So I need to get 3 numbers, I need to add them up, I need to multiply them, I need to calculate the average, and then display the output. The only other question you might have of the client is, what do the numbers look like? And that would be like a 9 or a 9.5 or a 8.99999999999. And in this case, if it was a 9, that would be an int. And if it was a 9.5, that would be a float. And if it was a number with a lot of precision to the right, that would be a double. So we might ask the client, what does these numbers look like? And they could be mixed. It could be ints, floats, and doubles. Okay, so once we have that, we need to design a solution. And one way is to do what's called an Ipo chart. An Ipo chart lists the input. It lists whatever process or calculations you're about to make, and then it lists your output. So in this particular case, my input is just 3 numbers, and I'm making the assumption those 3 numbers are all integers. My process, I'm doing 3 things. I'm computing the sum, I'm computing the product, and I'm computing the average. My output is going to say the number, all added up equals whatever that is. And then all multiplied equals whatever that will be, and the average of these 3 numbers is whatever it is, some number. So that would be an Ipo chart, and the I stands for input, process, and then the last thing is output. So an Ipo chart, one of my design tools. For this example, my final design tool would be something called pseudocode. And pseudocode is nothing more than just a list of steps, kind of like your first assignment. Get 3 numbers from the user, add them up, get the product by multiplying them together, get the average, which is the sum of them divided by 3, display the output as we saw up in the Ipo chart, and then stop. So that's pseudocode. Okay, now I'm going to take my design tool, I'm going to go into Visual Studios, and I'm going to create a solution. First thing I'm going to do in Visual Studios is I'm going to say #define _CRT _secure _no _warnings type, just like you see it in all caps. It's got to be the first preprocessor directive, and all this does, if you type it, is this stops Microsoft Studios from making me use the Scanf or the _S commands. This is optional, but this is not. You need to have a header. It doesn't have to have the little lines, but it just has to say who wrote this program, when they wrote it, and something about it. Here is linking to the 2 libraries, the standard library and the input-output library. And again, there are other libraries, many other libraries you can link to. Here's the beginning of my program, the end of my program. So this is my main. Notice at the end of every mustache, I make a comment. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create 3 integers, int num1, and every time I create a value, I want to do something called initialize. Initialize would be number 1 gets, that's how this is pronounced, that's not equals, that's gets 0. So most of my numeric variables will be initialized to a 0. Int num2 gets 0, int num3 gets 0, int sum gets 0, and int product gets 0, and finally int average gets 0. So in this program I'm going to need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 variables. So 3 to input the values from the user, and 3 to do the calculations per my Ipo chart. Notice I can do this all on a separate line, like I did here. Or if you wish, you can bring this together with commas, and I don't have to repeat the word int. So if I have multiple ints, I can put them on the same line. So I can do it like this or this. It's your choice. But if I'm putting them on the same line, the data type appears once and commas go here, not semicolons. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to get input from the user. Something like prompt them to please enter the first integer value, and then I need to use Scanf to get it. And when I use Scanf, Scanf is broken down into two parts. It's the command Scanf, and if you don't do this, you have to put an underscore S. The first part in a Scanf is inside of double quotes, and I call that the format string or the placeholder string. This percent symbol, which is the shift 5 on the keyboard, is called a placeholder, and I represents a placeholder for an integer. So in our programs, we will have placeholders %i for integer, type. We will have %lf for long float, or that is a double. We will have %f, which would represent float. And in this class, we'll have one more. That's %c, and that's for a character or a char. So our placeholders are going to be i's, lf's, f's, and c's. Integer, long float or double, float, and char. So in the Scanf, one of those placeholders go here, and then goes the name of the variable where I want to store the value that the user's about to type. Now notice in C, I need this weird symbol. That's a shift 7, and that is the ampersand, and the ampersand is pronounced the address of operator. So the Scanf needs these two parts, and this address of this variable needs to be here. So you're going to, all semester long, inside of a Scanf, put an ampersand. And that's my input for the first number, and I can just kind of copy that down twice, and I can say please enter the second integer value, and then down here I can say please enter the third, and this would be the second, and this would be the third. And I like to line my colons up so I see that this guy's the longest. So now when the user sees what they're about to see, oops, everything will make sense and it'll all line up perfectly. So I could test this at any time if I wanted to, and now might be a good time to test it. So I'm going to run it. When I run it, program comes to the console window and says please enter the first value. So I type it, please enter the second value, I type it, and please enter the third value. So that's what I would expect, 3 sentences, and the program to end. I didn't like that being right at the top of the screen, so I can use an escape sequence, which is the /n, and that creates a carriage return or a new line. So I'm going to assume right here, place a comment in the code that says get the input, because that makes sense. And notice white space and indentations are just for readability only. So here'd be another comment, do the calculations. So I need to set the sum. The sum is num1 plus num2 plus num3. I need to get the product, and that is num1 times num2 times num3. And finally, I believe I need to do the average. Average is nothing more than the sum, which would be num1 plus num2 plus num3 divided by divided by 3 represents the numbers. I could use sum because it's already been, the addition's already happened, and that would give me my average. So there's my calculations, and then the last thing I have to do is the output. So my output is going to be 3 sentences, and I believe if we go back to the design tool, the output looked like this. So this is what I expect my output to look like. So back into the program, my first statement is going to be printf. Now watch this. My printf, the first part of my printf is inside of double quotes. So I want to say placeholder for an integer plus a placeholder for an integer plus a placeholder for an integer equals some integer. And then I'm going to do a new line. So that looks pretty strange. An integer plus an integer plus an integer equals an integer. Notice I have what I'm calling 1, 2, 3, 4 placeholders. 1, 2, 3, 4 placeholders. That is inside the format string of the printf. Well, the second part of the printf is the value list. If inside of this format string I have any of these percent symbols followed by any of my placeholder characters, the I, the L, F, the C, or the F, I must provide a value for each of these. So over here I'm going to say num1, comma num2, comma num3, comma sum. So what this has done, unless I have an error, which it doesn't, this first placeholder matches up with the first value in the value list. The second placeholder matches up with the second value in the value list. The third placeholder matches up with the third value in the value list. And the fourth placeholder matches up with the fourth value in the value list. So I think that looks pretty good. And I'm going to do another printf, and I'm going to do the second statement. And the second statement is going to look so much like the first. I'm just going to copy the first and bring it in. So all I did here was show the multiplication symbol. And that's not really doing multiplication. I'm just showing it. And I'm going to be populating it with num1, num2, num3. But instead of sum, I'm going to say product. So that looks pretty good to me. I have one more statement. And that statement is the average is. Okay, let's take a look at this statement. I say the average of some number and some number and some number is some number. Very weird, but that makes sense to me. So then inside of my my format string, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 placeholders again. So I need 4 values. 4 values. So I'm going to cheat because I'm lazy, and I'm going to bring this in from up here, paste it in. So I'm going to need num1. num2, this one is num3, and this last placeholder is not the sum, it's the average. So let's look at that again. So this program is going to input 3 numbers, do some calculations, and then output values. So I'm going to run this and test it. I'm going to run it and test it. So here it goes. It's running. There's my, oops. There is my output window, and I see I have an error right here. So that's not supposed to look like that. I'm going to leave this program and figure out what I did wrong. You guys should have been yelling at me. All right. So what I did is, you could see, I put forward slash instead of backward slash. Oops. If you were here, you would have said, hey, but you weren't. So fix that. I'm going to run it again. Running testing is easy. So here I am. I'm back in the program. Notice those 2 backward slash n's. Sorry about that. The phone rang and I had to take a phone call, and I actually was on that phone for several minutes, and I forget the last thing I did. So I believe the last thing I did was try to run this, and when I run it, it asked me for 3 numbers. So here I go. 5, 10, and 15. And then it displays the output, but it happens so fast we can't see it. So the last thing we want to do in our program is we need to do a pause, and that is system PAUSE. So that's going to pause the screen after it displays the output. I guess I can put that there. So I'm going to run it again. And here we go. So I'm going to type in the first number 5, 7, and 9. So 5 plus 7 plus 9 equals 21. 5 times 7 times 9 equals 315. The average for 5, 7, and 9 is 7. Now notice this is showing no numbers to the right of the decimal place because it is an integer. When I do integer division, I will lose any remainder. And it doesn't round up, it just chops it off. So if I wanted to have some more precision, I should have used floats instead of ints. Okay, let's go back to the program one more time and take a look at it. So the first thing is we did this no warning. We did our comment header. We did our includes. We set up main. We set up our variables. We know we can do this on a single line or multiple lines. If I want to shorten the length of the program, I could bring that up. And I could have done this all in one line instead of two. Your choice. I have a comment saying I'm getting the input, get the 3 numbers. I have a comment saying do the calculations. There's the calculations. And then finally, I am displaying the output. And I'm pausing, and that's the end of the program. That's the end of the program. One more second, I'm going to show you one last little tip or trick, and here it goes. This is a lot of typing, system pause, and I'm lazy. What I would prefer to do is just type pause like that. The problem is pause is an unknown command. So I can create an alias for system pause like I'm going to do right here. So up here with my includes, I do something called a pound define, and I define a word. Notice because it's like a word I'm defining or a constant, it's going to go in all caps. So this is a very simple little line. This right here equals this. So anytime the program sees pause, it substitutes system, left paren, double quote, pause, double quote, right paren. So now I don't have to type all this, I just type capital pause. And you'll see down here in the bottom, that red squiggly went away, it works. And you can test it, run it, and I am done. Thank you. Let me know if you have questions.